Before we dive in, don't forget, if you're hooked by this kind of story, hit that like button so we know you want more, drop a comment with your favorite part, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter in this saga. Now, let's get into it. The air was thick with burnt ozone and the metallic tang of blood. Captain Elias Ward crouched low behind the fractured spine of a collapsed wall, keeping his breathing measured, forcing his pounding heart to stay quiet. Through the static-laced comms in his ear, the voices of his squad had already gone silent one by one, each cut off mid-transmission. The worst part wasn't the screaming, it was the sudden dead quiet after. That meant whatever was out there didn't take long to finish its work. Dust clung to his face, mixing with sweat, stinging his eyes. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and risked a glance over the jagged stone. The battlefield stretched out like the bones of a slaughtered beast. The blackened shells of once tall towers, rivers of molten slag where plasma fire had chewed through steel, and the occasional flicker of movement between shadows. Somewhere beyond the smog, the Dominion was waiting, not just with soldiers but with their whispered nightmare. Gravemaw. The name had haunted war briefings for months. They said it was a living siege engine, a predator bred on the Dominion's death worlds, a creature whose armor could turn heavy ordnance into harmless sparks. Elias had studied the Dominion's bioengineered warbeasts once, back before the war. Back when he still believed his work could be about understanding alien life, not killing it. But the thing they called Gravemaw, that was something no lab could have contained. A low vibration rolled through the ground, subtle at first, then growing until it rattled the debris under his boots. Elias froze, ears straining. It wasn't artillery. Artillery came in violent bursts. This was steady. Heavy. Footfalls. He gripped his rifle tighter. His orders were simple: survive long enough to transmit the intel core strapped to his back to command. That meant avoiding direct contact with the beast. But as the sound grew closer, avoiding it no longer seemed an option. Somewhere in the haze, a Dominion soldier screamed, short, sharp, then cut off by a wet crunch. Silence again, broken only by the rhythmic thud. 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 A shape emerged through the smoke, massive and deliberate. At first, Elias thought it was a moving piece of collapsed building. Then it breathed. The first clear look was worse than the rumors. The creature's head alone was the size of a dropship's cockpit, its eyes twin pools of dim bioluminescence glowing a deep amber, casting the smoke into strange shadows. Armor plating the color of scorched iron ran along its neck and shoulders, not manufactured but grown, each jagged ridge catching the faintest light. Claws like hooked blades dug into the ground with every step, leaving gouges in the stone. Elias knew the smart move was to keep still, let it pass. Instead, instinct dragged him upright, rifle half raised, though he knew it wouldn't matter. The Dominion soldiers flanking the beast had stopped advancing, hanging back in a loose semicircle as if the thing didn't need their protection. If anything, they were keeping their distance. The massive head lowered, swiveling toward him. That glow in its eyes fixed on his position, not with the cold mechanical lock of a targeting system but with the unervingly precise attention of something alive. It inhaled deeply, the sound a deep rumble in its chest. Elias fought the urge to run. A predator's gaze always followed movement. It stepped closer, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Elias braced for the inevitable. He'd seen footage of Gravemaw tearing apart armored transports as if they were made of paper. He'd die here and the intel core would die with him. Then, without warning, Gravemaw's head jerked upward. Its body shifted, massive forelimbs bracing into the ground. Elias heard it before he saw it, the shriek of incoming Dominion artillery. He flinched, expecting the blast to tear through his cover. Instead, the sky went white as a plasma shell detonated, against Gravemaw. The blast hammered into the beast's armored flank, heat and pressure slamming Elias backward into the rubble. For a heartbeat, the world was only light and noise. When his hearing cleared, he realized he was still alive. Gravemaw stood between him and the smoking crater, its armor scorched but intact. It glanced down at him again, eyes narrowing, and rumbled low in its throat. Elias couldn't process it. The Dominion had just fired on their own weapon, unless it wasn't their weapon anymore. One of the soldiers behind Gravemaw shouted something in a language Elias didn't recognize, raising his rifle. The beast turned on them with a speed that belied its bulk. A single swipe of its claw sent the soldier's weapon clattering away, the man stumbling backward in terror. The others hesitated, uncertain. That was all the time Elias needed to realize the balance had shifted. Gravemaw's head swung back toward him, closer this time. It bent low, so close he could see the minute ridges of its hide, the faint scars that scored its plating. For a second, neither moved. Then, just for an instant, Elias thought he saw something in its gaze. Recognition. He didn't have time to wonder. More Dominion troops were moving in, and the beast's tail lashed with a force that toppled a chunk of wall into their path. Gravemaw shifted again, its entire massive frame settling squarely between Elias and the advancing soldiers. Elias's pulse hammered. This wasn't random aggression. This was deliberate. Gravemaw roared. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, a deep, resonant vibration in the bones. The Dominion soldiers faltered. And in that moment, Elias understood that something had changed in the rules of this war. The galaxy's deadliest predator was no longer hunting him. It was protecting him. The realization was almost more terrifying than the thought of being killed. Because if Gravemaw was on his side, it meant two things. His survival odds just spiked, and the Dominion's control over their most feared weapon had broken. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of burning metal and blood across the battlefield. In the distance, a new wave of soldiers was advancing, their weapons gleaming in the smoke. Gravemaw rumbled low, planting itself firmly in place, its head lowering as if daring them to come closer. Elias raised his rifle, stepping in beside it. He didn't know why Gravemaw had chosen him. But he knew this, whatever came next they were facing it together. And in war, allies like that didn't come twice. The ground still thrummed beneath Elias's boots as Gravemaw shifted its weight, the heat from its plated hide rolling off in waves. Smoke drifted between them and the Dominion soldiers retreating into cover, their weapons raised but not firing. They didn't know what to make of this, and truthfully neither did he. The beast's head swiveled toward him, that strange amber glow holding his gaze. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even curiosity. It was familiarity, like a soldier locking eyes with someone from an old photograph. The sound of a Dominion gunship's engines broke the moment. Gravemaw's head jerked up, nostrils flaring. Elias followed its gaze skyward, 3 aircraft cutting low through the smoke, their gun ports opening. His instincts screamed for cover. Gravemaw had no such hesitation. The beast moved, a wall of muscle and armor, planting itself to intercept the incoming fire. The air lit with streaks of plasma. The blast struck its flank, sparking harmlessly off the ridged plating. Elias didn't waste the reprieve. He slid into the wreckage, reloading, scanning for an escape route. Gravemaw finished its defiance with a roar so loud it made the gunships veer off, circling away to regroup. When the beast turned back to him, it rumbled deep in its chest, then stepped toward the ruins. For a second, Elias thought it was leaving him. Then it paused, glancing back. Waiting. He moved toward it without thinking. Every logical part of his mind screamed against it. This thing had been engineered to annihilate anything in its path. But another part, the one that had once knelt in a muddy alien marsh to free a trapped juvenile predator from a steel snare, whispered something else. That whisper grew louder when he noticed a scar under Gravemaw's plated jaw, faint but precise, the same place the trap had cut into that young creature's hide years ago. A Dominion patrol was closing in from the east, boots crunching through broken glass. Elias and Gravemaw slipped deeper into the skeletal remains of the city. The beast moved with surprising stealth for its size, each step placed with deliberate care to avoid rubble that might give them away. Elias kept pace beside its shoulder, rifle at the ready. The scent of scorched metal and wet earth clung to the air between them. A sharp crack split the silence, sniper fire. The shot clipped the wall inches from Elias's head, sending chips of stone into his cheek. Before he could react, Gravemaw lunged sideways, knocking him flat with a sweep of its tail. The second shot came, aimed directly where Elias had been standing. Instead, it struck Gravemaw's forelimb, punching through softer joint tissue. The beast roared, not in pain alone but in fury, eyes burning brighter. Elias scrambled to his feet, firing toward the distant glint of the sniper's scope. The shot missed, but it gave Gravemaw the moment it needed to bound forward, crushing the sniper's perch in an explosion of shattered concrete. The Dominion marksmen vanished in the collapse. They kept moving deeper into the ruins, until the patrol's voices faded into the distance. Gravemaw slowed, its gait uneven from the wound. Elias could see the dark fluid seeping from the forelimb, viscous and almost metallic in smell. Against all better judgment, he stepped closer and dropped to one knee beside it. "Hold still," he muttered, pulling a field kit from his belt. The beast huffed, watching him closely, every muscle tensed as if ready to pull away. But when Elias touched the edge of the wound, it didn't move. He cleaned the injury as best as battlefield conditions allowed, sealing it with coagulant foam and wrapping the joint with reinforced mesh. Gravemaw's breathing slowed, that deep rumble in its chest shifting from threat to something almost content. It struck him then, This wasn't the behavior of a Dominion-controlled war beast. They didn't hesitate, they didn't guard, and they certainly didn't allow enemy soldiers to tend their wounds. Gravemaw wasn't malfunctioning. It had made a choice. A metallic clatter somewhere to the north drew both their attention. Through the dust, shapes emerged, 6 Dominion soldiers in exo-armor, fanning out with precision. Gravemaw's tail lashed once, claws digging into the ground. Elias took position at its flank. They came fast, firing in disciplined bursts. Elias dropped the first 2 with quick, controlled shots, but the others pressed hard. Gravemaw surged forward, absorbing fire on its armor as it slammed into the enemy line. The force sent soldiers scattering, armor dented, weapons spinning away. One tried to bring a plasma lance to bear. Gravemaw caught him by the chest and hurled him into a wall hard enough to crumple steel. When the last soldier broke and ran, Elias found himself breathing hard, adrenaline still flooding his system. Gravemaw turned, sniffed the air, then moved on without a backward glance, as if the fight had been nothing more than clearing debris from its path. They reached the shattered bones of an old transit station, its roof mostly intact, a rare shelter. Gravemaw curled against one side, positioning its massive frame between the open entryway and Elias, who sank onto a fragment of bench. In the muffled quiet, the distant echoes of battle seemed almost far away. Elias watched the beast for a long moment. Every movement, every decision, it had placed itself between him and danger. Not out of programming. Not out of accident. It was protection, deliberate and unwavering. That was when he realized something that tightened his chest more than fear ever could. They were being hunted by both sides now. To the Dominion, Gravemaw was a rogue asset that had to be destroyed before it turned further. To his own command, it was an unpredictable enemy weapon. He could almost hear the voices of his superiors. Leave it. Secure yourself. Don't bring it in. But leaving Gravemaw was no longer an option. The beast's head lifted suddenly, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing toward the street beyond. Elias rose, rifle ready. From the shadows between the ruins, a new shape emerged, larger and lower than Gravemaw, its body rippling with wet muscle under pale plating. Elias felt the shift in the air. This wasn't a patrol. This was another war beast. The newcomer's eyes gleamed cold white as it stalked into view, flanked by Dominion handlers in heavy exosuits, cables running from their gauntlets into the control rigs on its spine. Gravemaw rose to its full height, a low growl building into something that shook the station's walls. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger. The handlers raised their weapons, and the pale beast let out a hiss like steam venting from a ruptured pipe. The first was terrifying. This one was worse. The street between them became still, save for the wind pulling a drifting ash. Elias knew this was no random encounter. The Dominion hadn't sent this thing to fight him. They'd sent it to kill Gravemaw. And neither side looked ready to back down. The pale beast prowled forward, claws dragging furrows into the ash-strewn street, its handlers keeping pace with mechanical precision. The cables between them pulsed faintly, transmitting commands that made the creature's movements unerringly synchronized with their steps. Gravemaw's growl deepened, a bass rumble that reverberated through the cracked stone beneath Elias's boots. Elias could feel the difference between them already. Gravemaw moved like a soldier deciding its own tactics. This thing moved like a blade in someone else's hand. The Dominion handlers raised their weapons. The pale beast lunged first. Gravemaw met it halfway, the collision shattering a section of the station's front wall in an explosion of debris. The sound was a mix of metal grinding and flesh tearing as the two predators slammed into each other, claws raking against armor, teeth snapping for vital points. Elias darted for cover but not far enough to lose sight. He knew if Gravemaw fell, he'd be next. The handlers barked rapid commands into their gauntlets, and the pale beast adjusted instantly, twisting under Gravemaw's weight to rake its talons along the joint of his hind leg. Gravemaw roared in pain, staggering back, but answered with a savage headbutt that knocked the pale creature sprawling. Shards of plating fell from its flank, revealing raw, dark tissue beneath. Elias's eyes locked on the cables. If those broke, the handlers would lose their leash. He slipped around the edge of the ruined bench, keeping low as the beasts clashed again. Gravemaw slammed the pale beast into a wall hard enough to crater the stone, but the handlers yanked their creature free with a synchronized pull, sending it darting sideways with blinding speed. A swipe of its claws caught Gravemaw's side, tearing through the field dressing Elias had applied earlier. Blood as dark as oil sprayed across the broken tiles. Elias's gut twisted. He'd patched that wound minutes ago and now it was bleeding worse. The handlers had to go. He sprinted through the dust and wreckage, vaulting over a collapsed support beam. The nearest handler turned just in time to see Elias raise his rifle. 2 shots punched into the man's visor, dropping him instantly. The cable to the pale beast flickered, that side of its body stuttering mid-lunge. Gravemaw seized the opening, clamping massive jaws around its opponent's exposed shoulder and wrenching hard. The crunch was audible even over the roars. The second handler shouted in alarm, snapping his gauntlet to force the beast into a defensive roll. Elias dove behind a slab of stone as the pale creature swung its tail like a whip, the force cracking concrete. Dust choked the air. He leaned out and fired, catching the remaining handler in the leg. The man went down, but his gauntlet still glowed, sending a command through the cable. The pale beast shrieked, twisting violently, and slammed its head into Gravemaw's chest. The impact drove the larger predator back into a half-collapsed column. The structure groaned, then gave way, burying both beasts in a cloud of pulverized stone. Elias coughed through the dust, heart hammering. He couldn't see who had come out on top. Then the pale beast emerged, limping but alive, blood dripping from deep gashes along its flank. It stalked forward toward Elias now, its handlers incapacitated but its eyes still locked on the last target it had been given. He backed away, fumbling for a grenade. The beast tensed to spring. The rubble behind it exploded outward. Gravemaw surged free, battered and bleeding but unbowed. With a roar that split the air, it launched itself onto the pale creature's back, claws sinking deep into its armored spine. The pale beast screamed, thrashing, but Gravemaw's jaws found its neck and clamped down with crushing force. Elias didn't waste the moment. He sprinted toward the last handler, ripping the cable free from his gauntlet. The glow died instantly. The pale beast went still, its limbs locking as the control systems cut out. Gravemaw didn't hesitate. It twisted its head and tore the creature's throat open, hot blood steaming in the cold air. The body hit the ground with a heavy finality. Gravemaw stood over it, chest heaving, amber eyes blazing. Elias approached slowly, rifle lowered. The beast's gaze found him, and for a heartbeat, he thought it might turn that feral energy on him. Instead, Gravemaw stepped aside, letting him see the kill in full, as if presenting proof that the threat was gone. Up close, Elias could see the cost of the fight. Gravemaw's flank was torn open in 3 places, the armor plating cracked along its left shoulder. One eye was swelling shut from a deep gash above the brow ridge. It should have been dead by now. Instead it was standing for him. Voices carried on the wind, more troops approaching. Elias looked toward the sound. This time they weren't Dominion soldiers. They were human. Relief lasted all of 3 seconds before the familiar hiss of his comm came to life. Captain Ward, this is command. Gravemaw is an enemy combatant. You are ordered to disengage immediately and await extraction. Do not attempt to bring the asset in. Repeat, do not. Elias glanced at Gravemaw, who was watching him as intently as any soldier awaiting orders. The beast didn't understand the words, but it understood tone. The low rumble in its chest carried the same defiance he felt rising in his own gut. More human troops appeared through the smoke, weapons at the ready. The leading officer took one look at Gravemaw and raised a fist. The squad spread out, flanking. Their eyes were on the beast. Elias knew the stance, they were about to open fire. He stepped forward, placing himself between them and Gravemaw. That's enough, he called out, voice carrying over the distant crackle of flames. It's with me. The officer hesitated, but the rifles didn't lower. Gravemaw shifted, the tension in its massive frame rising. Elias kept his voice steady. You fire on it, you fire on me. A ripple of uncertainty passed through the squad. The officer's jaw tightened. Captain, that thing is a weapon built to kill us. Maybe, Elias said. But it's the only reason I'm still breathing. Behind him, Gravemaw growled, not at the humans, but at the sound of boots pounding from the opposite street. Dominion forces were closing in again. Elias's pulse spiked. He was standing between his own people and the enemy, with a bloodied apex predator at his side, and nobody seemed sure which side he was actually on anymore. The officer's voice was taut. Stand down, Ward. This isn't your call. Elias looked over his shoulder at Gravemaw. The beast met his eyes, unblinking. Somewhere deep inside, he knew his next words would set the course for both their fates. He turned back to the squad. It is now. The Dominion forces broke into view. Both sides tensed, weapons rising. Gravemaw crouched low, ready to charge. Elias's grip on his rifle tightened. He didn't know how this standoff was going to break, only that when it did, the field would run red. The enemy lines were breaking, but not from any strategy the Galactic Coalition had predicted. The apex beast, sleek, scarred, and taller than a war mech, moved like a living wall, its massive frame shielding Captain Jace from the storm of plasma fire. Every bolt that should have burned through his armor instead slammed into the creature's hide, leaving only faint scorch marks on its obsidian black scales. Jace didn't have time to question why it was protecting him. All he knew was that every second the beast stayed between him and the enemy bought him a chance to regroup. Around them, the battlefield was chaos, a fractured plain littered with shattered drones, burning trenches and the screams of dying soldiers. The Aerith Dominion was pushing harder than ever, their shock troops pouring forward in a wave of claws and teeth. His comm crackled. "Captain, we've lost the eastern flank. Reinforcements are..." The voice cut off with a burst of static, replaced by the sound of distant explosions. The beast snarled, its breath a molten hiss. It slammed its forelimbs into the ground, sending a tremor through the earth that staggered the approaching soldiers. Its tail lashed out like a whip, sending 2 Dominion warriors flying. Jace ducked under the cover of its chest, firing his rifle at any target that broke through the beast's defensive line. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. According to intel, the Dominion had released the Apex Beast to wipe out the Coalition's command unit. Every recorded encounter ended with entire squads annihilated in minutes. But instead here it was, choosing to take the hits for him. Their eyes met briefly. Its gaze was sharp, intelligent, and familiar. Something in the way it moved, the way it positioned itself in front of him, triggered an old memory, one he had buried years ago. Jace. It was Rylan breaking through the smoke, sprinting toward them with a squad of battered Coalition Marines. His voice was hoarse. "We have to pull back to the ridgeline. The Dominion's bringing in artillery." Jace nodded but didn't move. The beast growled low, glancing toward the ridgeline as though it understood. It shifted its body, still keeping him shielded, and began backing toward the higher ground, each step deliberate, measured. They moved as one, the Marines forming a loose perimeter while the beast guarded their center. Plasma bolts hammered against its back, and though it staggered once, it did not falter. When they reached the ridgeline, the Coalition artillery roared to life, lighting up the horizon with thunder and fire. The Dominion's front ranks buckled, their assault faltering under the bombardment. But victory wasn't certain. Not yet. As the smoke thinned, Jace saw something that froze him. On the far side of the battlefield, another shape emerged, a second apex beast even larger than the one beside him. Its roar shook the ground, and Dominion forces surged forward again, emboldened by its arrival. The beast at Jace's side tensed. Its muscles coiled, claws digging into the earth. This wasn't just another predator. It was a rival. Rylan's voice came over the comm, "Captain, we can't hold if 2 of those things come at us." Jace glanced at the beast. It glanced back. In that moment he understood, it wasn't just protecting him. It was warning him. The second beast began to charge. The first let out a deep, resonant roar that reverberated through Jace's bones. Then, with a single powerful leap, it launched itself down the slope toward its counterpart. The impact of their collision shook the ridgeline, a clash of claws and teeth that sent shards of armor like scales flying. Jace watched, torn between awe and dread. Every blow they traded could kill a man outright. Yet the beast he knew, if he could call it that, wasn't just fighting for dominance. It was fighting to buy them time. "Captain?" Rylan grabbed his arm. "We have to move. Now." Jace's mind raced. Retreat meant abandoning the beast to fight alone. Staying meant risking all their lives. Down below, the 2 titans grappled, each strike echoing like distant thunder. The ground shook with their fury, the air filled with the sound of tearing metal and bone. The larger beast lunged, clamping its jaws around the neck of Jace's protector. A sickening crack split the air. The smaller beast stumbled, blood pouring from a deep wound. "No!" The word tore out of Jace before he could stop it. He broke from the perimeter, sprinting down the slope, ignoring Rylan's shouts behind him. He reached the fallen beast just as the larger one reared back for the killing blow. Without thinking, Jace fired his rifle point blank into its eye. It roared in pain, staggering back just long enough for the wounded beast to slam into it again. The 2 predators tumbled, a blur of fury and blood, until the larger one finally broke away, retreating into the smoke with a bellow of rage. Jace knelt beside his beast, placing a hand on its massive chest. Its breathing was ragged, but its eyes were still locked on his. In them he saw gratitude. Recognition. Around them, the Dominion forces were scattering, their offensive shattered by the loss of their champion. Coalition soldiers pushed forward, securing the field. Rylan approached, panting, his eyes wide. "You're insane, you know that?" "Probably," Jace said, not looking away from the beast. but I wasn't leaving it behind. The beast gave a low rumble, almost a purr, before its eyes slid shut. Medics rushed forward, unsure how to treat a creature like this but working anyway. Jace stood, rifle in hand, scanning the smoke-filled horizon. The battle might be over for now, but he knew the Dominion wouldn't stop. And when they came again, he also knew something else. This beast, this supposed mindless killer, wasn't their enemy anymore. It was his ally. And together they were going to change the war. The world was fire and ash around them. Smoke coiled in the air, the scent of scorched metal and burnt ozone clinging to every breath. Kale's ears still rang from the detonation, a hollow hum drowning out the chaos of retreating troops. The apex beast, blood streaking its pale mane, stood over him like a living fortress, its chest heaving, its eyes locked on the enemy line. "Go!" Kale shouted hoarsely, shoving himself to his knees. "You've done enough." The beast didn't move. Its low growl vibrated through the ground, a sound of defiance rather than fatigue. From beyond the ridge, the enemy advanced in formation, their mechanized armor glinting under the flickering light of burning wreckage. This was no retreat, they were coming to finish the job. Terran's voice crackled over comms. "Kale, you need to pull back. They're converging on your position." Kale's eyes narrowed. Pull back meant abandoning the ridge, surrendering the last line of defense before the enemy's push into the refugee camps. He looked at the apex beast, this alien predator that had been unleashed to kill him only hours ago, and saw something beyond instinct in its gaze. The beast's breath came slow and deliberate, like it understood the stakes. A shriek split the air, the enemy unleashing their drones in a swarm. The apex beast roared in answer, a sound so primal it cut through the battlefield's cacophony like a blade. Then it lunged, not at the drones but into the center of the advancing line, moving with terrifying speed despite its wounds. Metal shattered beneath its weight, enemy soldiers thrown aside like paper in a storm. Kale charged after it, rifle raised, his boots pounding the broken earth. The two fought like they were bound by some unspoken pact. The beast's claws ripped through armor plating, and Kale's rifle found the exposed gaps. They moved in a rhythm, predator and soldier, covering each other, anticipating every threat. Explosions painted the ridge in pulses of orange and white, and still they pressed forward, step by brutal step. Terran's voice came again, this time in awe. "What the hell are you two doing?" "Winning," Kale snarled, dropping another soldier with a precise shot. A missile screamed overhead, striking the base of the ridge. The ground quaked, throwing Kale to his knees. The apex beast staggered, its flank torn open by shrapnel. Blood dark as midnight poured down its side, but it didn't fall. Instead, it planted itself between Kale and the enemy, body trembling but unyielding. Kale crawled to its side, his hands bracing against the beast's massive shoulder. "You're not dying here," he said through clenched teeth. The beast turned its head, its gaze steady on his. For a heartbeat, Kale thought he saw a flicker of recognition, gratitude even. Then, with a guttural snarl, the beast surged forward again, forcing the enemy back. From the west, a sudden barrage lit the sky. Friendly artillery. Terran's unit had arrived, hammering the enemy line with relentless fire. The tide turned in minutes, soldiers falling back, their advance shattered. When the last of them broke and ran, the battlefield went eerily quiet save for the crackle of flames. Kale stood there, chest heaving, the apex beast beside him. Its head hung low, breath ragged, but it remained on its feet. He reached up and rested a hand on the thick fur of its neck. "Guess that makes us even," he said softly. The beast made a low rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. It took one step closer, lowering itself until Kale could lean against its shoulder. Around them, soldiers stared in silence, their expressions caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. Terran approached slowly, rifle lowered. "You know, Command is going to lose its mind when they hear about this." Kale smirked faintly. "They'll get over it." In that moment, under the blackened sky, Kale realized something unshakable. This wasn't just a battlefield alliance. Whatever bound them now, man and beast, was forged in fire and blood, and it wouldn't be broken by politics or orders. The apex beast turned its head toward the distant horizon, the direction the enemy had fled. Its ears twitched, muscles tensing, but it didn't move. It was waiting, watching, protecting. And Kale knew without a doubt that the galaxy's most feared predator had chosen its side. Under the red glare of burning wreckage, the battlefield had fallen into an eerie hush. Smoke twisted through the cold air, the acrid tang of scorched metal and ozone clinging to every breath. Kalen staggered forward, one hand pressed against the gash along his ribs, the other clenched around his sidearm. His visor flickered, struggling to compensate for the interference still rippling from the beast's entrance into the fight. He could see it, feel it before it came into view. The apex beast's heavy footfalls thudded through the dirt like distant drumbeats. Moments ago, it had shielded him from the plasma barrage meant to tear him apart. The memory was still raw, its colossal frame slamming into him, wings folding protectively around them both, heat and fire beating against its armored hide until the air itself seemed to scream. And then it had stood, unbowed, its roar tearing through the chaos and scattering their enemies like leaves in a storm. Now as Kalen limped toward the ridge, the beast emerged from the haze, blood-matted fur steaming, armor plates cracked and smoldering, one massive claw still clutching a crushed war drone. Its eyes found his instantly, those golden orbs cutting through smoke and shadow, locking on him with an intensity that was both terrifying and reassuring. "You shouldn't have done that," Kalen rasped. His voice was weak but the words carried weight. The beast tilted its massive head, a guttural rumble vibrating through the ground, not in defiance but in quiet acknowledgement. The calm crackled in his ear. "Kalen, fall back. The enemy's regrouping, you've got minutes before they push again." It was Varric, the human commander who had long doubted Kalen's mission to control the apex. Now his tone was sharpened with urgency and, though he'd never admit it, concern. Kalen looked at the beast. "They'll come for you first." The apex growled low as if amused by the thought. In the distance, flickers of movement betrayed the enemy's advance, columns of armored infantry, supported by the remaining hunter mechs. Kalen's fingers tightened around his weapon, but he knew it wasn't enough. He didn't need to say a word. The beast's gaze swept the horizon, assessing, planning. And then, without a sound, it moved. The apex shot forward in a blur of muscle and fury, covering the ground with impossible speed. Its roar cracked through the smoke, shaking the sky, and the enemy line faltered. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, but the beast was already weaving between them, leaping into their front ranks with a force that crumpled metal like paper. Kalen followed as best he could, firing in measured bursts, every shot landing true as he covered the flanks the beast left open. The battlefield became a storm of motion, roars, gunfire, the scream of tearing steel. The apex fought like a force of nature, its claws rending, tail smashing through barricades, wings sweeping enemies into the dirt. But Kalen could see it was hurt, badly. The plasma burns had blackened patches of its hide, and every movement left a faint trail of blood. A sudden blast threw Kalen to the ground. His ears rang, and as he forced himself up, he saw it, a hunter mech twice the size of the others, cresting the ridge with cannons warming to fire. The apex saw it too. Without hesitation, it charged, ignoring the infantry still trying to bring it down. "Don't!" Kalen shouted, but the beast didn't slow. It took the first volley full on, armor plates shattering, and still it drove forward. Claws locked onto the mech's torso, wrenching with impossible strength. Sparks rained like falling stars as the machine's system screamed in protest. Then Kalen realized the mech's cannons were pointed directly at him. The apex saw it too. In a heartbeat, it threw itself between him and the mech again. The blast was deafening, the light blinding. When Kalen's vision cleared, the beast was still standing, but barely. Its breathing was ragged, blood dripping freely from a dozen wounds. And yet even now it roared one final time, a sound that froze every enemy soldier in place. Kalen didn't waste the moment. He surged forward, emptying his weapon into the mech's exposed core. It staggered, sparked, and then collapsed in a heap of molten steel. Silence. The remaining enemy forces broke, retreating into the smoke, unwilling to face what had just torn through their lines. Kalen stumbled toward the apex, his hands shaking. It lowered itself onto its forelegs, bringing its head down until its golden eyes met his at level. "You saved me," Kalen said quietly, the weight of the moment pressing into his chest. "Twice." The beast blinked slowly, the deep rumble in its chest not one of threat, but of something older, deeper. "Respect. Recognition." The calm crackled again, Varric's voice cutting in. "Kalen, what is that thing?" He didn't look away from the beast. "Not a thing," he said. "A guardian."